Well, that was interesting. Also, by the way, the parking enforcement here drive around the little Fords, but they have the AI license plate scanners on them. So, like Santa Monica, I don't know what you're up to. Okay. So, I mean, you're gonna get it soon, but it's like, okay.
What you found is the missing pre-railroad source code of Ogden. It is not merely a collection of plaques about four old men. In one small
We got pretty far into it. Let's see if I can pick up where we were. We're at Weber. Well, Weber. Jedediah Smith. We got his Practical Pastures, Rocky Mountains. The Crow did not need him to discover it. That's important. So I can start there. I thought that's important. It's a matter of perspective. It's the critical indigenous people theory. I don't know if that exists. Oh, I need to hold the shift and click at the same time. Nice.
The Crow did not need Smith to discover land they already knew. The nationally consequential event was that indigenous geographic knowledge was transferred into an expanding American commercial information network. That information was then distributed to trappers, mapmakers, emigrants, military planners, road builders, and eventually railroad surveyors. Smith's route is especially astonishing because in August 1826, he left the Rendezvous region in or near Cache Valley and traveled southwest toward California. His party crossed what became Utah, Nevada, and California and reached the Mexican settlement system near San Gabriel. He later crossed the Sierra Nevada and the Great Basin while returning east. Utah historians credit
He
him with the
came to
first
us.
documented American overland journey to
He came to
California,
us.
the first American crossing of movements. The interstate accelerated them again. I had traveled from California across the Sierra, Nevada, and the Great Basin into Ogden. At this monument, I discovered a man who had attempted a version of that journey in the opposite direction in 1826, without a highway, railroad, telegraph, GPS, weather forecast, internal combustion engine, or Starlink. But Smith's story is also a story about borders. California was then governed by Mexico. Mexican officials were suspicious that Smith and his heavily armed American trapping party might be spies or the leading edge of an American territorial incursion. Smith had entered not merely another landscape, but another country. That suspicion was not irrational. Less than 20 years later, the United States would annex California and the broader Southwest following the Mexican-American War. Smith's journey therefore sits at the intersection of exploration, mapping, commerce, and eventual territorial conquest. A map can look scientific and neutral, but a map can also become advance infrastructure for an empire. Captain James Brown. Warpay becomes a city. Then I reached the Captain James Brown Monument, and the entire Mexican War story connected directly to Ogden. Brown enlisted in the Mormon Battalion in 1846 and became captain of Company C. The wider battalion marched from Iowa toward California during the Mexican-American War. Although Brown himself was placed in charge of a sick detachment at Santa Fe and ordered to Pueblo, his group later traveled by way of Fort Laramie and South Pass into the Salt Lake Valley. That corrects an important simplification. Brown did not personally complete the entire battalion march to San Diego. The battalion's best-known road-building legacy was the wagon route opened farther south under Phillips Street. George Cook, Brown's monument, however, connects him specifically to Pueblo, Fort Laramie, South Pass and then Utah. Brown was later sent to California to collect military back pay owed to members of the Pueblo detachment. He returned carrying gold coins from that federal military payroll. Some of that money was then used to purchase Miles Goodyear's Fort Buenaventura and its livestock and improvements. Think about that sequence. The United States goes to war with Mexico. Latter-day Saint refugees enlist in the United States Army. The Army pays them in gold. A battalion officer carries that money back from California. The money purchases a fort and land still described as lying within Mexican territory at the time of the transaction. That purchase becomes Brownsville. Brownsville becomes Ogden. Ogden becomes the Transcontinental Railroad junction. Federal military money had been converted into settlement capital, land control, urban development and eventually national transportation infrastructure. That is one of the clearest examples of stacked systems I have encountered anywhere on this trip, and the sources disagree about the transaction. The 1947 monument I photographed says Brown purchased the land, livestock and fort for $3,000. Utah's official historical accounts generally give the purchase price as $1,950, including the fort, improvements and most of Goodyear's animals. I cannot settle that discrepancy merely by standing in front of the monument, but noticing it is important. Bronze is durable. Bronze is not infallible. The marker also describes a Mexican land grant covering an enormous area. Other accounts call it a Spanish land grant. Later federal land law would still have to determine legal ownership. This is paper infrastructure. People can occupy land, fence it, farm it and build a fort upon it. But an American municipality also requires surveys, deeds, patents, boundaries and recognition by government institutions. 10 forts. Fear becomes urban design. Then I found the map
It's quite
titled
pretty.
Pioneer Forts in and near
It's
Ogden,
beautiful, actually.
Utah. It identifies 10 forts constructed between 1846 and 1861. Fort Buenaventura, Farr's Fort, Brown's Fort, Bingham's Fort, North Ogden Fort, Mound Fort, Uinta Fort, Huntsville Fort and Kingston Fort. That changed my mental picture completely. Ogden did not grow outward from one isolated frontier cabin directly into a railroad city. Before it became a rail network, it was a network of forts. The forts were distributed around rivers, settlement areas, canyon entrances, farmland and routes of movement. They provided concentrated places for families, animals, food, tools and mutual protection. Later roads, farms, canals, neighborhoods and municipal boundaries filled the spaces between them. The map contains an especially revealing sentence. Although no Indian attacks ever occurred, the early pioneer settlers built forts to protect themselves against that possibility. That means anticipated danger shaped physical development even where the anticipated attack never happened. Fear became architecture. Possibility became a capital project. Security planning altered where people lived, how closely homes were placed, where animals were kept and how the settlement expanded. But the sentence also exposes the limits of the monument's viewpoint. It describes native people principally as a danger feared by settlers. It does not begin with the fact that settlers were constructing permanent enclosures and claiming land within an existing indigenous homeland. The absence is part of the evidence. A settler monument explains why settlers believed they needed protection. It does not automatically explain how northwestern Shoshone communities experienced the arrival of forts, livestock, farms, fences and permanent land claims. So the map should be read twice. First, as a map of pioneer security infrastructure. Second, as a map showing the expansion of a new land system over an older indigenous one. Lorin Farr, the system's operator. Then I reached Lorin Farr, and Lorin Farr may be the single person who best explains how Ogden changed from a group of forts into a national infrastructure hub. His monument says that he helped establish Farr's Fort in 1850, assisted in laying out Ogden, organized its first government and became the city's first mayor. But he was not only a politician. He helped build the first local sawmill and gristmill. That means lumber for buildings and ground grain for food. He participated in creating a woolen factory, That means clothing and local manufacturing. He helped build the first road through Ogden Canyon. That means access through the mountain wall to water, timber, farms, settlements and routes eastward. He directed surveys, roads and irrigation canals. That means property boundaries, mobility and the controlled movement of water. He served simultaneously as a civic official, territorial legislator and major religious authority. And then he became a leading railroad contractor. The National Park Service records that Central Pacific construction in Utah was carried out under a contract involving Ezra Taft Benson, Lorin Farr and Chauncey West. Their work included grading portions of the railroad approaching Promontory and Ogden. In one lifetime, Lorin Farr moved through nearly every layer: fortification, settlement, food processing, timber, textiles, water, roads, surveying, municipal government, territorial government, religious administration, railroad construction. That is exactly what I mean when I talk about systems intelligence. A person looking only at a railroad sees tracks. A person looking only at government sees a mayor. A person looking only at agriculture sees irrigation. A person looking only at business sees mills and factories. Lorin Farr's life shows that these were not separate systems. They were mutually dependent parts of one regional development project. There is also a warning inside that story. Farr's ability to operate across so many systems partly came from a concentration of civil, religious, economic and political power that would be unusual and troubling by modern democratic standards. The same person could influence land, roads, water, labor, worship, law and government. Systems integration can create extraordinary building capacity. It can also reduce checks and balances. President's School requires understanding both sides. The monument says President Ulysses S. Grant later issued Ogden's town site deed to Farr in his capacity as mayor. Ogden City's records confirm that in 1872 federal land patent granted Farr and his successors approximately 2,480 acres for the municipal town site. That document completed another chain. A fort acquired under a disputed Mexican or Spanish-era land claim became a Mormon settlement. The settlement became a territorial city. The territorial city received a federal patent from the President of the United States. The physical city had existed before its American legal title was fully regularized. First people built the city, then the paperwork caught up. What the whole discovery means, what I found in this monument cluster changes the meaning of the Transcontinental Railroad. The railroad did not suddenly arrive in an empty place in 1869. For approximately 40 years before the Golden Spike, trappers had been collecting geographic intelligence. Native people had been teaching outsiders where passes, rivers and valleys led. American and British companies had been competing for workers and resources. Explorers had tested routes to California and Oregon. Mexico and the United States had fought over sovereignty. Military payroll had been converted into land and livestock. Settlers had constructed forts. Surveyors had divided land. Canals had redirected water. Mills had processed timber, grain and wool. Road builders had opened Ogden Canyon. Local government had been organized. Contractors and labor forces had been assembled. Only then could Ogden become a railroad hub. Promontory did not create Ogden's importance from nothing. Promontory activated a junction that had been under construction for generations. And the way I discovered this matters almost as much as what I discovered. I did not arrive with a scheduled lecture and leave afterward. I wandered. I noticed a monument. I walked around it. I found another monument. I photographed the difficult to read bronze. I saw a tiny QR code. I scanned it. The QR code opened several pages. Those pages led to South Pass, Cache Valley, the Crow Nation, Mexico, California, the Mormon Battalion, Federal Gold, 10 forts, irrigation canals, canyon roads and railroad contracts. That is not wandering without a curriculum. That is a curriculum built through contact with the world. The monuments are not the conclusion. They are portals. And Ogden is not merely the place where trains transferred. It is where geographic knowledge, imperial rivalry, military money, religious migration, land law, municipal authority, water engineering, industrial production and continental transportation all transferred into one another. Promontory is where the rails touched. What I found in Ogden explains how an entire nation became capable of reaching that moment.
Yeah, I mean, it's a pretty interesting thing. You Um, as time goes on, the names of these people stick around. Stanford, Farr. I mean, we just drove by the Farr ice cream ice. It was a large brick ice building, and what's remaining, it looks like there's an ice cream store still there. And you're like, well, where's the and like you the train is Stanford, and then he's governor at one point, and they're like, was he? They say in the national park, they say Governor Stanford was here during the Jupiter, and you're like, wait, was he governor at the time that happened? Conflict of interest much? I think someone's on fire up ahead. Um, I see smoke. Uh, well, I don't know how much of that I'm gonna see. What am I looking at? That looks like it's at the airport. To the left? Oof. Oof. Uh, do you see the smoke? Yeah, that's a lot of smoke. Well, it's not my business. I'm just gonna keep moving on. If there's people trying to go there, there's not much I'm gonna. Oh man, that does not look good. Um, oh, I'll check the news on that later if I remember. Oof. Okay.
Sacramento to Ogden, reading America as a living machine. What Morgan is doing on this journey is larger than retracing the Transcontinental Railroad. He is studying how a nation is assembled across time. He began in Sacramento, traveled through Folsom, Colfax, Dutch Flat, Truckee, and Donner Pass, descended into Reno, investigated the Paiute conflict, entered the Keck Mineral Museum and the Desert Research Institute, crossed Nevada through Elko and Lithium Country, reached Promontory Summit, and then discovered Ogden. Every stop has revealed a different layer of the same national system. This is a study of geology, water, energy, transportation, labor, extraction, war, communication, settlement, science, and government. It is also a study of speed, how long it takes a human being, a wagon, a train, an electrical signal, an airplane, or a digital message to cross the same landscape. Most importantly, it is a study of cost. Every infrastructure system creates opportunity. Every infrastructure system also moves burdens onto somebody else. That is the deeper purpose of this expedition. Sacramento, where the systems converge. The journey began in Sacramento, but Sacramento was never merely a railroad starting point. It was already a river city, an indigenous homeland, a gold rush supply center, a place of agriculture, horses, wagons, steamboats, levees, warehouses, banks, and political authority. It became California's capital because transportation, commerce, and government were already converging there. The Central Pacific broke ground in Sacramento in 1863 for the western portion of the first Transcontinental Railroad. When that line finally joined the Union Pacific in Utah, it created a continuous railroad network of roughly 1,776 miles between Sacramento and Omaha. But standing in Old Sacramento reveals more than the official railroad story. There are riverboats and railroad tracks, cobbled streets and wagon routes, warehouses, and raised sidewalks. Sacramento is an intermodal city built before the word intermodal became common. Cargo could arrive by river, transfer to a wagon, enter a warehouse, move onto a train, and then cross an entire region. People, animals, money, gold, mail, and political instructions all moved through overlapping systems. The railroad did not replace everything that came before it. It connected to those systems and reorganized them. That is the first lesson of the journey. New infrastructure rarely erases the old system completely. It stacks itself on top of it. Today, highways cross rail lines, electrical wires cross waterways, fiber optic communications follow transportation corridors, aircraft fly above all of them. Morgan is traveling through those layers in a hybrid truck that also serves as a power plant, shelter, disability.
Alright, well, we're still streaming. I want to try and get this red. Try again.
Sacramento to Ogden, reading America as a living machine. What Morgan is doing on this journey is larger than retracing the Transcontinental Railroad. He is studying how a nation is assembled across time. He began in Sacramento, traveled through Folsom, Colfax, Dutch Flat, Truckee, and Donner Pass, descended into Reno, investigated the Paiute conflict,
I should
entered the
switch to
Keck Mineral
Starlink.
Museum and the Desert Research Institute, crossed Nevada through Elko and Lithium Country, reached Promontory Summit, and then discovered Ogden. Every stop has revealed a different layer of the same national system. This is a study of geology, water, energy, transportation, labor, extraction, war, communication, settlement, science, and government. It is also a study of speed, how long it takes a human being, a wagon, a train, an electrical signal, an airplane, or a digital message to cross the same landscape. Most importantly, it is a study of cost. Every infrastructure system creates opportunity. Every infrastructure system also moves burdens onto somebody else. That is the deeper purpose of this expedition. Sacramento, where the systems converge. The journey began in Sacramento, but Sacramento was never merely a railroad starting point. It was already a river
Oh, it's
city,
getting
an
stronger.
indigenous homeland, a gold rush supply center, a place of
Maybe we're
agriculture,
leaving the town
horses,
and the towers
wagons,
are less busy.
steamboats, levees, warehouses, banks, and political authority. It became California's capital because transportation, commerce, and government
Oh,
were
gone.
already
Just lost
converging
it.
there. The Central Pacific broke ground in Sacramento in 1863 for the western portion of the first Transcontinental Railroad. When that line finally joined the Union Pacific in Utah, it created a continuous railroad network of roughly 1,776 miles between Sacramento and Omaha. But standing in Old Sacramento reveals more than the official railroad story. There are riverboats and railroad tracks, cobbled streets and wagon routes, warehouses and raised sidewalks. Sacramento is an intermodal city built before the word intermodal became common. Cargo could arrive by river, transfer to a wagon, enter a warehouse, move onto a train, and then cross an entire region. People, animals, money, gold, mail, and political instructions all moved through overlapping systems. The railroad did not replace everything that came before it. It connected to those systems and reorganized them. That is the first lesson of the journey. New infrastructure rarely erases the old system completely. It stacks itself on top of it. Today, highways cross rail lines, electrical wires cross waterways, fiber optic communications follow transportation corridors.
Did it fail in the same place? Whoa, that bridge, there it is. Well, we're expanding this too. Whoa, wow. This is like the I-80. This is the I-80 expansion in Los Angeles. What are we? This is big deal. We just crossed over the Transcontinental Railroad. Oh, I was supposed to go to this rest area to do some here. Okay, here we go. Good. Good, because I can see the railroad from here on for the river. This is the goal. Baby, this is what you came for. Lately, this is what you're looking for. Do, 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 do. All right, here we go. Well, let us stop here for a second and turn on Starlink. We're just gonna switch to Starlink because this is unreliable.
And then discovered Ogden. Every stop has revealed a different animals, money, gold. Crossed Nevada through Elko and Lithium Country, reached Promontory Summit, and then discovered Ogden. Every stop has revealed a different layer of the same national system. This is a study of geology, water, energy, transportation,